Thanks, Nick. Nick only said we're very important because KPMG are our debt advisors. So I'm pleased to give an update on where QPM's at. I presented here last year about the same time, a much smaller audience since a lot of Mexicans weren't allowed into the country of Queensland. You know the drill here. So just a quick summary for those of you who are not familiar with QPM. First thing that distinguishes us is we don't have a mine. We have no approvals, we have no drilling programs. We'll be importing ore from New Caledonia, from some of the world's longest established nickel laterite mines. We have binding ore supply agreements for all of the ore requirements for our plant. So those mines are already in place. They've been operating for many, many decades. And they're only 4 days steaming away from the Port of Townsville, where our plant will be located just south of. And that 4 day steaming is cheaper than the transport cost for many proposed operations in the country. Short trip, 40 kilometres down the Flinders Highway, and you're at the Lansdowne Eco-Industrial Precinct, a zone heavy industry location where our plant will be located. Our feasibility study comes out later this year, and we're aiming for FID next year, and then turning soil and pouring concrete, etc., early next year. Partnering with us in all of this are LG Energy Solutions and POSCO. We have binding offtake agreements with them for nearly 2/3 of our production. So the question you should ask is, why did they do this? Apart from the fact that all nickel users are starting to get desperate because they're starting to see exactly what Peter just talked about. They also, outside of China, are very conscious of the ESG standards that nickel and cobalt supply chain comes along with. And I rate QPM's sustainability standards as the world leading. And if it's not the world leading, then you'll need to find something that does better than this. Negative CO2 emissions, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So we won't be just zero carbon, and most claims of zero carbon, as we all know, have zero truth associated with them. We are negative greenhouse gas emissions following an ISO 14040 and 14044 life cycle analysis. So this is a real number. The project will be on already cleared land, so we don't have any land clearing. Obviously, we don't have any child labour. No tailings dam, we've got no solids waste stream to deal with, no processed liquid effluent. So that, to me, is stellar ESG standards. Now, something we're particularly delighted with, which has happened since last year, is the likelihood that we are going to be a zero solids waste plant. Now, how do we achieve that? Well, firstly, we employed the direct nickel process. The direct nickel process uses hot nitric acid to leach the ore. That dissolves virtually everything. And Peter will even dissolve dirty nickel sulfide cons. It dissolves virtually everything. So when you dissolve virtually everything from the ore, all your nickel and cobalt obviously end up in product. The iron, you turn that into hematite as part of the nitric acid recovery step that we have. The magnesium gets turned into magnesium oxide. So you've got virtually no solids left over. In fact, 25% of the ore doesn't dissolve, and that's primarily quartz. Quartz and a bit of chromite and a few other leftovers. Work that we have done with civil engineering groups have shown that that is suitable for an engineered landfill, displacing mine sand, and the Department of Environment and Science has said, hey, this looks like ticking all the environmental boxes as well. So all of this is beyond remarkable. I'm not aware of anything like it. Just on to the somewhat remarkable negative carbon. So how do we achieve that? Well, we'll be sourcing the gas that we need for our plant from the Northern Bowen Basin metallurgical coal mines. They're the highest grade, lowest impurity metallurgical coal mines going around in the world, but they're also very gassy. They have a lot of methane associated with them. They're a stranded gas producer effectively. Currently, that gas is primarily flared or vented. Now, the flared gas, we just spend the money to intercept that gas. 1 tonne of methane, when it gets burnt, creates 2.75 tonnes of carbon dioxide. We intercept that and avoid the emission at the coal mine. we produce the emission at our site. So there's no net change in greenhouse gas emissions from us using it. So that's effectively zero carbon. The vented gas, methane, has a global warming potential of 28 times CO2. So every tonne of methane is the same global warming as 28 tonnes of CO2. We intercept that gas that was going to be vented, we burn it in our process. So you've just saved 28 minus 2.75, you can do the maths, a massive greenhouse gas reduction. So our greenhouse gas intensity, when we add in all the transport costs and the embodied greenhouse gas emissions in our reagents, etc., we're about minus 15 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of nickel. And as I said, that's a LCA ISO compliant. On the ore supply, the neat thing about the direct nickel process is it can process the whole laterite profile. Usually smelters take the bottom half, the saprolite, magnesium rich. HPAL, if you've got an HPAL nearby, takes the top half, the iron rich part. We can process the whole profile, because as I said, the nitric acid dissolves everything. We've chosen to take the top half from New Caledonia because that's the unloved cousin. Basically, they mine through that and that goes to waste stockpiles. There's only one user there, that's the Goro HPAL operation. So the island in New Caledonia is awash with nickel laterite, particularly the limonite. We're binding offtake agreements with Eramet SLN and with SMT. So basically, that's a win-win for New Caledonia and us. We're taking what's effectively a waste product. Onto location, 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 location. As we all know, if you want the script for a good location, look at this list on the right there. There's the script for a good location. There are probably only 3 places in Australia where you could do a project like this so simply, and that's Gladstone, Kwinana, and Townsville. We chose Townsville. We're working with the Townsville City Council and the Queensland Office of Coordinator General. We have prescribed project status, and the OCG are fantastic help with us. The approvals, as everyone says, gee, approvals take a long time. Yes, they do, and they are tedious and painful, but that's why we want to live in a society like this where we have rules like that. Our approvals are not on the critical path for us, but they're progressing well. In terms of the plant layout, that's one version of what it looks like, and you go from the ore stockpiles, through the dryer, through the leaching, through the nitric acid recovery, which co-generates hematite into the refinery circuit, which is just a conventional nickel, cobalt solvent extraction refinery. So in putting all of this together, we've obviously partnered with LG and POSCO. They came in as about 10% owners of us about May last year. And in exchange, they have nearly 2/3 of our offtake locked away for them. They wanted 100% of the offtake, and we declined at the time, which was a wise decision, as it turns out, because we are now awash with interest from so many different off-takers, because they've all seen the writing on the wall. So we're having very productive discussions with a number of those. So what else have we done over the last year? We had already completed extensive piloting. We continue to do some more piloting and test work for circuit optimization, and also, very importantly, to do the work necessary for our major equipment suppliers to give us performance guarantees. And that's really, really important. When you're doing something that's new, that's first of a kind, everyone's concerned about the risk, but we've got some of the world's largest suppliers of this equipment and this technology willing to provide performance guarantees because of the level of work that we've done. We have spent far more on our feasibility study than any junior would normally do. We're talking around about $40 million. We're partnering with Hatch as our engineering partner, and they're a tier 1 top-class engineering partner to use. Some of the key partners, equipment suppliers that we're dealing with, you can see all their names up there. So Hatch are doing our feasibility study. They're also supplying our thermal processing equipment. Jord are providing our crystallizers, Senet, our solvent extraction refinery plant, Akato, all of our leach vessels and mixers and agitators, Siemens, our process control system and digital twin modelling, and importantly, KBR, Obviously, you've all heard of KBR, but they have a subsidiary called KBR Plinker and another subsidiary called KBR Weatherly, and they are the world's largest and most advanced nitric acid equipment processing and handling suppliers, and we are partnering with them in the key parts of our plant. Approvals, I've already mentioned, are progressing well, and in no small way due to the support that we've had from Officer Coordinator General helping us navigate through all of that. The potential debt finances, we've got letters of support, obviously conditional upon a decent feasibility study coming out from NAIF, Export Finance Australia. K-Shore, if you haven't heard of them, that's effectively the Korean Export Credit Agency, so no surprise they're in there as well with a strong commitment to participating in our debt funding because they're taking 2/3 of the offtake. And as I said, remaining offtake, if some of my colleagues aren't here at the moment, that's because they're in discussions and meetings about that with various players. So we have a lot of interest, which is no surprise. What I haven't shown, like everyone else has, because you've already seen it, is the projected growth in nickel demand. Now, one thing that's in common with all the forecasters, Standard & Poor's, Bloomberg, Benchmark, Woodmac, etc., their forecasts over the last years, one thing they share in common is that they're wrong, of course, but all forecasters are wrong. But they're wrong in one way. They've all underestimated. There's been a consistent underestimate. So you're looking at 20 to 30% CAGRs minimum for battery, nickel, and cobalt demand. So it's a good industry to be in. Like many battery stocks over the last 6 months or so, there's been a significant evacuation from all things that might even share any resemblance with risk, or even if it doesn't have risk, there's been an evacuation. That bounce back has started to happen. I like to quote my former manager once removed, Robert Friedland, who used the analogy about the nickel game for batteries. It's like musical chairs. You've got a dozen people dancing around 3 chairs, and when the music stops, there's still only 3 chairs. And my corollary to that is all 12 of the dancers think they're the best dancers and they're going to get the chair. But what they've started to realise over the last few months is that, goodness gracious, maybe we're not such a good dancer, and maybe we need to move upstream. So Elon Musk, moving upstream. What did he say 2 years ago? We will never be involved in the mining industry. What's he doing? He's involved in the mining industry. That's not to criticise him, that's to say how sensible he is. Because if you want capital to do your projects, you need the OEMs to be in there. So one thing I should mention is our board. There's a few names there that you'll recognise. We have an extremely high calibre board that I'm really pleased to be working for. What I haven't shown is our executive team. We've got a collection of GMs who are outstanding. They've been involved in this sort of industry for a long, long time, and we're benefiting from their skills and experience. They've delivered the goods. Now, in conclusion, if you want to choose an industry to be in, the upstream battery materials supply business is a really good one to be in. I mean, Peter was talking about stainless steel, which still has the 5% CAGR, wonderful. Battery materials supply, you're talking 20 to 30%. In other words, you can quote me on this, the industry, the end users, needs every project, every bad project and every good project. So having a good project like QPM has, we're in a wonderful position. You couldn't ask for a better time to be doing something like this. If you want some more detail, check out our website and you can see a nice fancy video there, or catch us or my colleagues at the booth outside.